astrology was concerned with more universal things. The appearance of a new star was thought to herald a new political or religious movement. In fact, the bright star that shone over Bethlehem is reputed to have issued in Christianity. But on a much more micro scale, individual changes in the heaven, the position of the moon in the different mansions of the moon, position of the sun, and major conflicts and aspects had a very strong effect on magic. And so it's important to know these things from a magician's point of view, because it then gives you the times when you are most likely to have considerable success and times when work will be a little uphill. So those are all tabulated in magician's tables. And so the book began to grow, and even looking at the Kabbalistic material, it became obvious that this needed to be looked at from the point of view of the different trees, and also the names of God and of the spirits and the four different worlds have never really been put out in a very logical way. The other thing that I put in there was an extended correlation between the various different alphabets, like the Arabic alphabet, the Latin alphabet, the Hebrew, Coptic, and so forth, touched upon by Crowley in 777, but done in much greater detail in the Complete Magician's Tables. And, well, it just grew from there. You mentioned paganism earlier. It was quite a challenge to try and correlate a lot of the different pagan families of gods. And I know that section could be amplified considerably, but I certainly had fun doing it, and it provides a basis, hopefully, for many of the pagan theologies. One thing I personally found lacking was a timeline which included all the major magicians, alchemists, and Kabbalists, and so I've done that in one of the tables, so that you can easily look up who came before who. And I've tried to include even quite obscure magicians and Kabbalists who were important because they were actually practical. And I've left out some of the people commonly thought to be associated with magic, like, for example, Gilles de Rais, who was probably more of a mass murderer than a magician. And other people who've been of interest sort of in pretty casual histories of magic, but didn't actually make any contribution to the subject itself. And then the emergence of people being aware of Greek gematria I thought was worth reinforcing with a couple of pages of the most important Greek gematria, particularly of the gods and words of power used in the early Greek magical manuscripts. And then an expansion on the I Ching and a new way of looking at that. I think Crowley's correlation of the I Ching with Western magic suffers because his appreciation of the Chinese Taoist background to the I Ching I don't think was sufficiently adequate for the job. So I hope I've provided some more information there. And then, having done that, it became necessary to write some kind of a commentary because a lot of the material is new, and lo and behold, the book grew to well over 400 pages and more than, I think, just on 800 tables. And so we published it. And that's really how it came about.
Right. And just for people who haven't seen it, you do retain a lot of you have a column often that refers to the paths and the other kind of order that is in 777, and you also include the column numbers when appropriate from 777. So there is some cross-referencing in here for individuals who are...
A lot of cross-referencing. The idea being that if you take issue with anything that I've put there, you can very rapidly cross-check it back against a Golden Dawn version or something else. Obviously, the many columns that are new, because I think Crowley said only about 180 columns in 777, whereas Complete Magician's Tables has about 800 columns. The many columns that are new don't cross-reference back, but in the commentary, I've tried to note where the sources were so that people can check it against original material if that's what they want to do.
Right, and that's the other thing that I find kind of fascinating. There's a lot of different ideas floating out there, but you used mostly older manuscripts to compile this information.
Yes.
And when there was a difference between the manuscripts, especially in the various lists of the angelic names, you created different tables for each manuscript, saying this manuscript gives this list and this manuscript gives this list.
Yeah, I suppose that comes from my training, which was originally as a lecturer. I was an academic, and so I felt that it was necessary to lay it all out. Some people might find that a bit tedious, but rather than taking material and just blending it all together, I've instead shown where it comes from. So, I mean, one notable example is one of the most interesting lists of demons comes from Franz Barden's Practice of Magical Evocation. And in assembling that into a tabular form, it became obvious that many of the spirits came from other sources. So I tracked some of them down, and it's extraordinary that some spirits come from enciphered star names. Others come from the 72 Shemham Mephorash angels, and some are taken straight from Abramilin. So where I can, I've indicated the source of this material so that people can make their own decisions. I prefer the material which comes from working magicians and also the earlier stuff if I can find it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's been the policy all the way through. So I suppose a lot of New Age or newer material from the 20th century has not been included because I feel that if it hasn't been used practically or hasn't been around for a while, that it doesn't have the same validity as the names of planetary spirits that were used 2,000 years ago, 200 years ago, and 2 years ago, and still work.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, you've included some interesting tables, like you have a large section on Christianity where you have like the levels of hell from Dante's Inferno and the Doctors of the Church, listing saints, things like that. Why did you feel it was useful to include that kind of material?
Well, I was tempted to cut it out entirely, but the thing about the Western tradition is that a lot of it has been filtered through Christian commentaries. So, for example, although a number of Gnostic texts have survived in the Nag Hammadi collection or in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the commentaries on them and the descriptions of their basic doctrines come from the early church fathers. Now, it's not always a good idea to consult the enemy about the quality of some a religion they're trying to suppress, but sometimes that's the only sources. So I thought to be even-handed, it's worth listing the doctors of the Christian Church. Also, angelology perhaps has flourished quite a lot under Christianity, and so that was worth mentioning. And the other bits of Christianity, like the geography of hell, which is from Dante, which you mentioned, is fascinating because references in the grimoires tie back to Dante, and you can see that people have used his geography sometimes. So that was worth putting in. And then the most controversial thing, I suppose, is the list of saints. And I devoted a couple of pages to them because some of the saints actually probably cover other entities, and also the Catholic idea of praying to saints in some way crosses over with some forms of magical practice. But yes, perhaps if I'd thought again, I would have cut that section out, but then it seems silly that most of the readers will come from a culture which has been heavily Christianized, and so it's useful to know where the boundaries are. Likewise, the section on Judaism, because of course the Kabbalah, which is the backbone of ceremonial magic, springs from Judaism, so it's worth listing some of that material. And also there's a small section on Islam, because Islam has also dealt with the archangels, which are common to all Middle Eastern religions. The other thing that struck me when I was putting this together is that, very strangely, the three largest monotheistic religions all sprang up in the same stretch of desert between, say, Mecca and Jerusalem. And the rest of the world, almost without exception, has produced polytheistic religions. So in my subject grouping, I've grouped those three religions together, and then in the polytheistic section, I've looked at Taoist gods, I've looked at Buddhist practices, also at Hindu practices, trying to correlate the different sorts of yoga and the different spiritual experiences which can be obtained using yoga. And so religion does overlap with magic, and therefore forms part of the tables that a magician may wish to consult.
Mm-hmm. The section of the zones of the body, mind, and spirit was kind of surprising to me on how you combined the very disparate elements. In this section, you have everything from acupuncture meridians and things related to, your Chinese Taoism background, then Kabbalistic parts of the soul, Egyptian parts of the soul, all of these aspects. What was your logic, or what was your idea about this section and pulling all of these things together?
Okay. So originally it became obvious that the spiritual anatomy of man, or the subtle anatomy of man, is quite important in magic. The use of the astral body, the use of some talismanic techniques connected with the etheric, and so forth. So I thought it was necessary to tabulate how people had divided up man's souls and spirits. And so the tables start with the Egyptian parts of the soul, and the Egyptians had quite a complicated way of doing it. And in fact, there I've been forced to list three traditional authorities on it, and then I've, in table Z16, I've put what I consider to be the breakdown now. So that the reader has four possibilities there. There has always been, in the Kabbalah, a lot of speculation about the makeup of the soul, of which the Ruach, for example, is the intellect, the Nefesh is the animal, the astral soul, and so on. So I put the original Hebraic words there, plus their translation and their interpretation. So those are sort of obviously part of the tradition. Less obvious is the Hindu parts of the soul, or the way Raja Yoga divides the soul up. And here, a lot of this material filtered through to the Golden Dawn via the world's theosophy, where terms like the astral plane and so forth were bandied around by the Golden Dawn, Diane Fortune, and so forth. So I thought it was necessary to tie these back into some tables so they could be compared with each other. So there's a set of 4 columns comparing and contrasting the Theosophic and Hindu parts of the soul. And then coming down a little bit grosser to the actual body itself, the energy that flows through the acupuncture meridians, which is Qi, which is also the energy which is relevant to Feng Shui. I thought if I can tie that back into a Western categorization, then that might be useful. And indeed, it worked out quite easily. It correlated first of all, to the 12 earthly branches of Chinese Taoist